Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. As a quick reminder, please subscribe really to support the channel. So today we're looking at the final cards that are being released within Lightning Overdrive, and this is just the full remainder of the list. First card is Pharaonic Guardian Sphinx. It's a level 8 Earth Attribute Rock type effect monster with 2,300 attack and 3,000 defense. You can only use each of this card's name's second and third effects once per turn each. 1. Once per turn, you can change this card to face down defense position. 2. If this card is flip summoned, shuffle all monsters your opponent controls into the deck. And 3. If this card you control is destroyed by an opponent's card, you can special summon one level 5 rock type monster from your hand or deck in face down defense position. So this is a brand new boss variant of the original Guardian Sphinx. That was a level 5 monster. I think it had 1,700 attack and 2,400 defense. So this is a buff on those stat lines. 3,000 defense isn't bad. Being able to flip itself from attack to defense means that you can not only trigger its effect to return those monsters to the deck, but you're then able to attack to do some damage, flip it into defense where it's at its strongest stat lineup, and then you can constantly rework that effect. It works really well with very defensive strategies and stall-based ideas. The original Guardian Sphinx only returned monsters to the hand, whereas this being able to send them to the deck means your opponent is unlikely to be able to recover those resources very quickly. Even if it's just things like extra deck monsters, it's a massive threat. They've taken all that time to produce those resources, to cover those resources, to bring out those monsters, and just to have them all returned, your opponent is most likely going to rage quit. Now, the third part of the effect is a recovery effect. It's really good because you can bring out either the original Guardian Sphinx, or you do actually have some level 5 rock type support. You've got Adamanticators, which are very popular. They've constantly, since they've been introduced, being abused. Probably other level 5 rock monsters, and I will be making a list at some point which cover these cards, and I'll also link it to this video. The next card is a Dark Eye Nightmare. This is a level 4 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 1,700 attack and 1,700 defense. You can only use this card's name's first effect once per turn. 1. You can banish up to 3 traps from your graveyard to apply this effect depending on the number you banished. 1. Draw 1 card and place 1 card in your hand on top of the deck. 2. Draw 1 card, or 3. Draw 2 cards then discard 1 card. Its second effect, once per turn if this card would be destroyed by battle, and banish 1 trap from your graveyard instead. When I see this card, it reminds me of something that Konami's tried to push for. They realise that traps have fallen out of favour, people don't really use them, unless they tend to be the broken ones like Infinite Impermanence or Evenly Matched. If they don't have a dual effect either, then they're kind of forgotten about. This is an attempt to try and work with those trap cards and remove those disadvantages, but I don't necessarily think it's worked. The ability to draw cards is okay, but its first effect is just replacing 1 card for another. That might be okay, but actually you're putting that other card back on the top of your deck. It's not like you're shuffling it. If you had shuffled it, I would say it's a little bit more consistent and maybe a better effect. Second part of the effect, drawing a card, okay, big deal, you're drawing 1 card. There are traps, spells that can do that much better. And the third part of that effect, to draw 2 cards and then discard 1, is also a okay effect, but depends on what you're drawing. If you're drawing into something weak, then it's not that useful. The final part of the effect, to protect itself from battle destruction by banishing a trap, is also very bizarre. There are monsters that have the battle protection without having some so useless as part of the effect, so I definitely think it's one of those cards within the pack that's just going to be completely forgotten about. 1. Kriwei is a normal spell card with the effect you can only activate 1 card with this card's name per turn. 1. Target 1 link 1 monster in either graveyard, shuffle it into the extra deck or special summon it to its owner's field. Okay, so you've got some of the Karibo monsters that are link monsters who can apply with this effect. You've also got some other link monsters as well that benefit from this. It's okay and it's useful if you're working on a link based deck, because you can then link climb. There's no restrictions on it. It doesn't say you cannot link using the monster summoned by this effect. All it simply means is you recover that to the extra deck, or you can choose to summon it. Any type of support which is useful for this is okay, but there's nothing I can think of in particular that works well with this. Star Mine is a level 4 fire attribute pyro type synchro effect monster with 2000 attack and 200 defense. It requires 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters, and you can only special summon Star Mine once per turn. 1. If this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, or destroyed by battle with an opponent's attacking monster, take 2000 damage, then inflict 2000 damage to your opponent. 2. If a monster in this card's adjacent monster zone is destroyed by battle with an opponent's attacking monster, or by an opponent's card effect, destroy this card, and if you do, take 2000 damage, then inflict 2000 damage to your opponent. So the point of this card is it's meant to be game ending. The amount of damage, you start off with 8000 life points. Depending on when you summon this, could be ending the game then and there. It is a double-edged sword, because if your opponent can get your life points down before they get theirs down to the threat level, so the 2000 or below level, that means someone is going to be losing at that point. You need to essentially make sure that your life points are above that 2000 safety zone, because you take the damage first and then your opponent takes the damage. So you, in that interaction, if this card goes, you would actually lose rather than your opponent. That's just how this card works. It does pretty much use this effect regardless of what you or your opponent does, so that's actually quite useful. But there are ways of interrupting this card anyway. You can send it back to the extra deck, or you could just banish it. Some means trying to get rid of this card without having to trigger it. It's nice type of effect, and actually there aren't too many level 4 synchro monsters. The first one was like Armory Arm back in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. So it's nice that they're actually thinking of new concepts to use with synchro monsters. Secret Hot Springs of the Far East is a field spell card. With the effect, you can only activate 1 card with this card's name per turn. Once per turn during each player's main phase 2, the turn player can gain 500 life points, and if they do, apply these effects for the rest of the turn. That player's monsters, normal and special summons cannot be negated, and if that player activates a spell or trap card, or a monster effect that includes an effect that special summons a monster, that activation cannot be negated, or that player's set spell or trap cards cannot be targeted by or destroyed by their opponent's card effects. This is one of those quite unusual interactions. It reminds me a little bit of a chicken game where both you and your opponent can abuse this card. Whilst it does have the ability to protect your cards, because firstly you're gaining life points, it can only be triggered during your main phase 2. So unless you're planning not to summon or set anything until main phase 2, this is very much after the fact. It's protecting something after the event could be done, so it's more useful for a defensive style of deck as opposed to an offensive. Being able to protect these cards is quite useful, but I think it's a very gimmicky idea. How likely it is to be broken, I'm sure someone will find a way, but I don't see anything that I can think of immediately. The next card is Fukubiki. It's a normal trap card, and the final card, which is each player shuffles their deck, and if they do, excavate the top cards of each deck and compare their attacks. Treat monsters with question mark attacks, spells and traps as having 0 attack. If their attacks are not equal, add the card with higher attack to its owner's hand, and if you do, send the card with lower attack to the graveyard. If their attacks are equal, place them on the bottom of the deck. So you're banking on what you and your opponent is drawing. Depending on the style and the archetypes they're running within those decks, you could end up searching for your own card, or you potentially give your opponent a card. It's also a risk that if they're equal, then those cards just go to the bottom of the deck. You might have drawn into something quite powerful and have wasted this trap card, or you also risk, if you've drawn into a spell or trap card, that you end up losing that card as well. So it's very high risk. It's part of a whole series of these kind of cards with this gremlin looking character. I'm sure in lots of different artworks and the various effects which are quite similar to this. I think this is one of those more gimmicky cards that might find a broken way of using it, but as of now I can't think of anything.